Welcome to Bible True Crime with Mr. Thoroughly. If you like true crime and interesting Bible stories, then this is the podcast for you. This week's episode is Revenge of the Mede. There will be broken bones and lions. I'm Steve, and I'm here with Heidi. Before we start this episode, I wanted to talk about something that we've been seeing in our yard quite a bit. Do you know what that is?
Deer?
Deer. We've had deer like crazy all around. I guess they've figured out that we're not hunting them right now. But I don't know how many deer. We must have dozens that live on our property there, but they're running across our driveway all the time. And when I get up in the morning and look out the window, I can see a deer real close to the house, and then look out the other windows and we see other deer. You know, we don't have a dog right now, and I think that the deer are just really roaming around our property. But the other day, we saw something a little unusual, and that was 2 bucks that were outside. I got excited. I saw this big buck sitting right out the bathroom window, and I came to tell Heidi about it, who's on the other side of the house. And her and my daughter Hannah looked out the window out there, and they saw a buck sitting out there. And I was like, well, it can't be the same one. And it wasn't, because the other one was still on the other side of the house. So we had 2 bucks, and then they saw a doe there also. But we've had a lot of deer lately.
This morning when I went outside, I had to make 3 trips out to the car, and there were about 6 deer out in the field in front of our house. And normally when I come out, they'll run off. And this morning they just stood there and watched me every time. So I think they're getting used to us.
I guess so. I hope they don't get too used to us. You know, we might get hungry sometime. Have to have some deer meat, but they sure are beautiful to look at.
Yeah. It's amazing to see how if you just make the slightest noise, they perk up and pay attention.
Yeah. Boy, they're sensitive ears inside the house. You make a noise, and that's very subtle noise, just talking, and they'll turn and look right at you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of crazy. Well, speaking of animals, in this episode, we're going to be looking at some animals. But I'm going to hold back a little bit about what the animals are. But they're going to be ferocious animals, and they might even roar. No idea what that is. I'm just keeping that super top secret. We are going to be looking in Daniel chapter 6 today. And this story that we're going to cover, some people might be familiar with it from Sunday school class, at least parts of the story. But most people are not familiar with the whole story, which we're going to get to the whole story today. And there's a reason why you probably wouldn't want to be teaching the whole story in Bible class.
In a children's Bible class, anyway.
Yeah, in a children's Bible class, yeah. Sunday school class, though. This is going to take place in the 530s BC. And you have Daniel, when you first are introduced into Daniel in Daniel chapter 1, it's around 605 BC. He's a teenager that's been taken in to serve the king. And throughout his time, through his interpretation of dreams, he gains a lot of favor with several different kings. And he is given a high position in the kingdom. So we start off with Nebuchadnezzar and then his son Belshazzar. But then the Babylonians are going to get conquered by the Medes and the Persians. And the next one that's in charge of Babylon, where Daniel lives, his name is Darius the Mede. While this story is going to be talking about Daniel, it's also going to have a lot to say about Darius the Mede, and what he does at the end of this is probably the wildest thing that we're going to look at today, and it might surprise some people. At this time, you know, if you're doing the math there and you're looking at around 605 BC that Daniel's captured and taken into captivity, he's a teenager at that time, and this happens in the 530s. So they estimate that Daniel at this time would have been in his 80s.
Wow. You never think of him in his 80s when you hear this or read this.
Yeah, I mean, we're only 6 chapters into Daniel, and it's a quick read, but you go from him being a teenager to being 80 years old. So it's kind of hard to picture that. And I think most depictions of these events don't have him looking that old, but I have seen a few that do have him. Now, Daniel, he always found favor with whatever king that there was. And that's where we're going to start off here in Daniel chapter 6. It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom. Now, a satrap was like a governor. And so when they conquered a kingdom, they would set people up to rule in different areas and just kind of control everything. So 120 of these governors or satraps. And over them, 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom these satraps should give account, so that the king might suffer no loss. Then this Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. And the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. Then those men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel, unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." Daniel here, first of all, it says he's one of the top 3 that ruled over all the 120 satraps or governors. And then it says that he rose even above the other 2. So he's like right below the king here, especially as far as favor. And so the other officials don't like that.
Is it just a jealousy thing? Or did they have some other reason to want something bad to happen?
I don't know, but there's always been, Daniel was a Jew. For him to be high up there, there might have been some jealousies over the Jews. And when you look in the book of Esther, you definitely have Haman, who's trying to exterminate the Jews because he doesn't like them. So it could be a religious thing, but, that's just speculation. Not sure there. It could just be that they don't like him having all the power when they want to have it for themselves. So maybe they're just jockeying for position, and
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, and he's trying to get to the top there. Yeah, we see some recurring themes that happen here, but they don't have anything they can accuse him of. They can't find any fault with him, so they have to find something that he does that's different from everybody else, and use that against him. And what that is the worship that he does as a Jew. So that's what they're going to attack here.
Okay.
Well, let's see what happens. Then these high officials and satraps came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors, are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction, that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document, so that it cannot be changed, according to the law of Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. So they convinced Darius, that they should pass a law that says for the next 30 days that King Darius is the only one that's supposed to be worshipped. And anybody that worships anyone else or any other god, then they're going to be thrown into the lion's den.
So they just accepted or acted like Darius was a god.
Yeah, and oftentimes that's the way that these kings were seen by people, even like the Egyptian pharaohs and things like that. They're seen as gods, and that's the way that they were revered and worshipped. Interesting here with that. So he probably didn't see anything unusual about that. There's going to be something big that happens from it. He might not realize that Daniel worships God, that he's a Jew, or what a Jew even is, or how that works. They're kind of tricking him into something. And one thing that happens here in Esther also is that when the Medes and the Persians, when a king passes a law, it cannot be annulled. It can't be amended. It is set in stone, and you can't take it away. If they trick the king into passing a law, the king himself can't even change it. And that's what happened in the book of Esther. Also, you have the same kind of situation there. So the Medes and the Persians kind of had a problem with the way that they made their laws irrevocable, and it caught them in trouble. And each instance, we'll see that's what happens. But God's able to work around these things.
Well, we're going to have to write that down and do an episode about Haman.
Yeah, that'd be a good one. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, "O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the lion's den, or den of lions?" The king answered and said, "The thing stands fast, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked." Then they answered and said before the king, "Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day."
It just seems crazy to me that people would be sitting around making up laws just so that they could trap people and get them to break the law. I guess not just people, but just Daniel, pretty much.
Yeah, they were desperate, and they didn't have any other way that they could attack him. So they just were like, look, he goes and prays to God 3 times a day. So all we got to do is make that illegal, and then we catch him in the act. And it's like they're all ready for it to happen. They're like, okay, we got him now, because that law was passed and it can't be revoked. So then they come before the king, and they remind him, they're like, "Hey, didn't you pass this law?" And he's like, "Absolutely." And they're like, "Well, Daniel broke it." So let's see what happens next now. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, "Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians, that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed." The main point of this story, we're seeing something that's happening to Daniel. It's the manipulation of the king that is going to be the real story that's going to come out of this. He's very distressed over all this, and he did everything that he could to try to change stuff, but they keep reminding him, you can't change the law.
Which seems so funny, because when they were putting the law into place, it really just, makes it out that the king has all this authority, so much authority that what he says can't be revoked. But then they use it against him and he can't revoke it. Yeah. That's just,
It's a bad loophole.
Yes.
That's what it is. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you." And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. No diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him.
Oh, I'd forgotten that the king really had a lot of feelings about all of this. I'd just forgotten all of that.
Yeah, and that's why I say that's the part that doesn't get talked about, in Sunday school classes. It's mainly about Daniel and the lions and all that. But they tricked the king, and the king loves Daniel, and he's very distressed by what's going on here. He doesn't sleep that night. So apparently, when they used this as a punishment, which really would have been a death sentence, they would put them in the day before, and then the next day they'd come to check on them and see, if they survived or whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to happen. So all night long, the king isn't able to sleep.
And it seems like at some point the king did learn about Daniel's God.
Yeah, or at least, but that might have been just what they were reporting. They're saying, look, Daniel does this all the time, even though we passed the law. Then, at the break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O king, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm." Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions. They, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces.
Wow.
Darius is the king of the Medes and the Persians. He's not a Jew or anything like that. He's not following the laws of God or anything. He was so upset by what they did to him that he threw them into the lion's den. But not just them, but their wives and their children were thrown to the lions also. And it's pretty graphic that, whereas Daniel was there all night long and wasn't harmed by the lions, these that the king throws in there, they don't even reach the bottom of the pit before the lions grab a hold of them and they crush their bones and kill them. So it just says that the lions overpower them just really quickly. So that would have been a pretty gruesome sight. But the king, it shows you how angry that the king was. And that's why I said we should call this episode, Revenge of the Mede, Revenge of Darius the Mede, because he got them back for what they did. And it's literally overkill, I guess you could call it that.
It really is.
But that's the way that this king chose to deal with that, and pretty gruesome stuff. But we also see that this king, Darius the Mede, he recognizes something about Daniel and Daniel's God, because Daniel's God rescued him from the lion's den.
It's neat to see, though, too, that Daniel doesn't hold being thrown into the lion's den against the king. It seems like he understood that the king had been tricked and that it wasn't his fault.
Yeah, I think that happened because Darius was trying to do everything he could to save him.
Right.
And he wasn't able to because of the law. But yeah, for Daniel, it's kind of like nothing happened. Nothing bad at all happened.
Yeah. Which shows that those lions, they had the power to get Daniel, but God's power was greater.
Yeah. Yeah. God was able to prevent that from happening. Okay, so now I'll read real quick here. Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. So that's all of Daniel chapter 6 there, but just a really interesting story there, and it shows what happens when people try to manipulate a king and what the king's wrath can do to them at the end there. You know, you kind of feel bad for the wives and for the children and all that, but that the king was so angry, he didn't see that as something that he shouldn't do. He's like, I'm going to show people that you don't mess with the king like this. And so he set an example by killing off their entire families. Well, that's it for this episode.
So, Steve, what words of wisdom can you leave us with today?
Well, Heidi, I'm going to read 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16 and 17. All Scripture is breathed out by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work.
Thank you for listening today. Be sure to follow the Mr. Thoroughly podcast. Share it with your friends, leave us your 5-star reviews, and join us again next time for more Bible True Crime.